Hey there, and welcome. My name is Andrea. I'm a dev advocate on the Flow team. And today I want to walk you through the Flow App Quickstart. Now, if this is your first ever foray into the Flow world, this is a great place to start. This little Quickstart app will show you how to create a pretty bare bones Web3 application on Flow. What you'll learn is how to use our front end client framework called the Flow Client Library, also called FCL. You'll learn how to, through FCL, communicate with the Flow blockchain, including sending a transaction. And all of this is going to be happening on testnet. So testnet is, let's say, a staging environment of the actual live Flow blockchain. So there's testnet and mainnet. And at the end of the video, I'll also link to you some resources that will show you how you can actually go from testnet to the local emulator, which will be a lot faster to develop on. But this will give you a great introduction to building on Flow. All right. So before we start, it's important to call out that Flow App Quickstart is built using Next.js and React. Not everyone is a React developer, not even me, if I have to be honest. I'm more of a Svelte guy myself. But whether you're a React, Svelte, Vue, whatever type of developer, we have some quick starts created here. So at the top of the Flow App Quickstart, you will see some links. These will take you to equivalent implementations in different frameworks, as well as a link to the complete list. One other thing to call out is these quick starts are a little bit more polished. So I created 2 out of those 3, and I took the opportunity to make things a little bit nicer. Today, we're going to do really bare bones, like no UI at all. So if you're looking on a tutorial on how to build a UI, please click on these links because that'll show you a nicer example. This is really just to show you all of the internal piping. All right. So with that being said, let's get started. Maybe it's also worth talking a little bit about the context. So we talked about the fact that this is going to be in React. Again, you don't need React to build an app on Flow. We're also going to be taking a look at Cadence. Cadence is the smart contract programming language designed for Flow. If you want to dive deeper into the Cadence language as a whole, definitely check out the documentation and check out the Cadence playground. In this tutorial, we're going to, very high level, we're going to interact with a single contract, which is the profile contract. So an example contract that could be used to save a user's information like their name, their favorite color, and we're going to see how to integrate with it, how to send a transaction through it, and how to query it. But before we start, we have to get everything up and running. Now, again, this is supposed to be very bare bones. So there's no Git repo or anything. This is supposed to get you going in, 20 minutes if you're not listening to me blabbing. So let's just get started, shall we? What you need to do is create a new app environment. We'll call this Flow App. So npx is just a way to download and execute a node module. And in this case, it's going to create a Next.js app for us, and it's going to initialize it and call it Flow App. So we're going to have a new directory called Flow App. So we're going to run this. If it asks you if you want to install npx create next app, say yes. And what it's going to do is it's going to download all of the dependencies as well. And we'll have a brand new directory with which to build our little Web3 app on or in. All right, it's created. So let's cd into it. And the next thing we got to do is install FCL. That's the only other dependency we're going to need. So what we just did is we cloned a basic Next.js project, which we'll walk through in just a second. And we added one dependency, which is FCL. Now let's open the folder here so I can show you what the app looks like. Let's also rerun that terminal so we have it handy. All right. So a Next.js app, again, as I said, I'm not a React or Next.js developer, but more or less app frameworks are very similar. We have a pages folder. Any file we add here is essentially going to be a route in our application, right? We're only going to use one route for this simple tutorial, which is going to be the index. So if we just go to the main page where this exists, it'll be this. And yeah, I think that's really all we need to know. Let's get this running npm run dev to show you what it looks like. So we can copy the host. Okay, cool. So this is what it looks like on localhost 3000. Again, this is a standard Next.js blank create next app template. We will, of course, remove all of this. But before we do that, we want to keep things organized. We are going to create a new folder within our application, and we're going to call it flow, within which we will have a config.js. We don't have to do this really, but it's just a way to keep things organized. So all of our flow related files are in one location. And we are going to add this code here. We are going to import the config function from onFlow FCL, and we're going to define two important config attributes. The first one being the access node API. So where should FCL look for stuff? Like what should it connect to? And in this case, we're connecting to testnet. And the second attribute is what should it use as a source of truth for what wallets to support? And in this case, we're going to use testnet using FCL discovery. So we're going to save that file and yeah, that's it. Again, feel free to dive a little deeper. Again, I'm trying to keep the video slightly short so that we don't go too off on tangents. Maybe I'll create some follow-up videos where we can dive deeper into each thing. So like as we go, we learn more things. But yeah, as I said earlier, the index.js is the main page where everything happens. So let's just replace everything that's there with a simple hello world, right? Hello world. Again, very ugly. We're not going to be focusing on the UI today. We are then going to talk about authentication. So we import the flow config here, okay? So that our config file is called and FCL is configured. Now comes the part where we have to actually call it, right? So I'm just going to copy the new code and show you what's changed. So we are, importing FCL. Use state is a way to create observable reactive variables in React. If you're a Svelte developer, it's going to be the equivalent of stores. And so you create a variable and you create a function that sets that variable reactively. So anything that's using this will get the updated value. And we're also going to use effect where we call FCL current user subscribe. And what it's going to do is it's going to subscribe to the current user. And anytime the current user changes, it's going to set the user variable with the actual current user. So we're passing in the setting function, the setter, to current user, so that when we subscribe to it and it changes, anytime it changes, we are setting this with this value. Got it? Or with the contents of that value. That way, anytime it changes, whenever we use it throughout our app, it will always be updated. So anytime, let's say we were to unauthenticate and reauthenticate, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second, this will change automatically with the different address, because again, user is tied to this subscription function, and the subscribe function is a method that's available with the current user via FCL. And anytime the current user changes, it's going to call the subscribe function and update and call this callback, which in this case is a callback that sets user. Okay. I'm almost confusing myself now by how many times I've said it. Hopefully it's clear. To log in, all we have to do is call FCL login. Okay. That's it. So FCL login and FCL sign up, which is more or less equivalent. And then last thing, to log out, we just call FCL on authenticate. The reason we don't have function calls here is because the function is automatically called on click with the button. This is like a React thing, but the concept you should understand here is that it's super easy to authenticate users. All we have to do is call FCL login, and FCL will take care of generating that login flow. It's going to show a pop-up of like what wallets are available to the user to use, and the user can select their wallet, login, etc. Cool. So let's take a look at what we just created. So we have Flow app. now, right? Just because we add flow app h1 and 2 buttons. The reason why we see these 2 buttons is because we are unauthenticated. Why are we unauthenticated? Because user.loggedin is false, right? Again, user.loggedin is a property of current user, which is being set to user. So we're reading that. All right, so let's log in. Let's see FCL in action. We click login and boom, this is the FCL wallet discovery flow. Now, if you've never used Flow before, let me give you a little overview of wallets. We have the most popular wallet at the moment of this recording is Blockdo. Blockdo is a both custodial and non-custodial wallet for Flow. It's super easy to sign up, has a great onboarding flow. So you just log in. If you don't have an account, just give an email. Actually, I'm going to show you how to create an account. And they have an app that you can use. Great stuff. And then at the moment of this recording, Lilico, which is also an awesome wallet, is an alpha. And I have the alpha installed in my Chrome browser. So I'm going to show you Blockdo because it's the most commonly used. And yeah, I'll show you how that flow goes. But the cool thing to understand here is that at the code level, we don't care what wallets the user uses, right? There's no specific Lilico or Blockdo flow here. It's all about using a single piece of code on the app side, which is FCL, and then the wallets integrate with FCL, and the 2 sides don't need to communicate. All right, awesome. So let's try and create a flow. So here, let's create another account. I'm going to show you how to create another account. I'm going to use a disposable email just because we are on testnet, so it doesn't really matter. So let's call this flowapp@mailinator.com. Okay. Let's register this. And let's go to Mailinator and flow app. And boom, we got our one-time passcode. We can paste this in here and that's it. That's literally it. I told you the Blockdo flow is amazing. So look, awesome. We have a testnet account now, which is 0x388 B7955, blah, blah, and it's tied to our email. And we don't have to worry about our private keys or anything. Of course, if you want a non-custodial option, then you use something like Lilico, or you can use Blockdo's non-custodial mode. So let's confirm this and boom, the app reacts. See that? Our wallet address is right there. How did that happen? Again, we are subscribing to the current user via this function. Whenever it changes, this function is called, which sets user. ADDR is an attribute of the user object of the current user. And yeah, it's here. And we can actually console log. We can do actually. We can stuff. Let's modify this slightly so I can show you. So we can set user with stuff and we can console log stuff. Okay. That way. So, okay. So let's open up the dev console. Let's remove this. Okay. This is the user object. Okay. So what we're doing, we're just like, what was before was a shorthand of this, right? Like it assumes that there's an argument passed in. Anyways, we have the address, we have the customer ID, we have the expires at. So whenever our authentication expires at, whether we're logged in, and services that we have. So like this is used to, for example, sign a transaction, but we don't have to get into that right now. The important thing to see is that at the top level, we have whether a user is logged in, which we're using down here, right? User.loggedin, and what address we have, which is ADDR. Awesome. Cool. So we can log out, we can log in, Blockdo, and Blockdo will remember our last 2's address. So we can just click confirm and boom, it's done. Isn't that amazing? And you can see how the objects here changed once we logged out and logged in because we're subscribing to that current user object. Awesome. So what's next? We did the authentication. Now we need to query the blockchain. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a temporary variable in the config, and we're going to map 0x profile to be the address on testnet of our profile contract. And we can actually take a look at this. If you go to flow view source, and you go to account, paste this in on testnet, you can see that there's various contracts here. In this case, we're going to use the profile contract. So this is literally the contract that we're going to be using. So feel free to take a look. So we have different public interfaces like get name, get avatar, get color. We have various profile properties and various utility functions. Awesome. So yeah. So what we're going to do here is have this be a placeholder. So we can put this in our cadence and it's going to map to this. And FCL will do that conversion for us. It's just like a shorthand, so we don't have to remember addresses. And we can have like emulator, testnet, mainnet equivalents of this and not have to worry about manually switching the addresses. This is more of like a build convenience, right? Or development convenience. All right, so what we're going to do is we need to import the contract and pass it to the user's account address as an argument. We're going to need to execute the script using fcl.query, and we're going to set the result of the script to the app state in React so we can display the profile name in the browser. Cool, so let's again replace the contents of our index.js, and I'll show you what changed. So let's refresh this page. And let's send a query. And you see, we don't have a profile set up. Damn it. Why don't we have a profile set up? That's because we don't have a profile yet. So how do we create a profile? But let's see how we're actually creating this profile, this query here. What we're doing is we use fcl.query, okay? And in here, we have this small cadence snippet, which imports the profile contract, a resource from 0x profile. And then we have the main function, which all it does is it expects an address as an input and checks whether there is a profile, if that address has a profile. In this case, there is no profile. So how do we create a profile, right? And if it does have a profile, then we set, so we have this new profile, this new variable called name, and we have the setter, set name. Again, this is like React specific. We call the set name to update this variable with the profile.name or no profile if it doesn't exist. And here we're just reading name in the actual UI. So there it says no profile. All right. So how do we actually create a profile? Well, great question. What we're going to do is we need to initialize our account and actually create the profile, right? So let's walk a little bit through what we're going to do here. So for our account to have a profile, we need to create a resource in our account. So the way that Flow works, that's different to other blockchains, is the things that are created via smart contracts, like non-fungible tokens, like fungible tokens, maybe like objects via contracts, are resources. And resources live within the actual user's account. And resources are a special linear type in Cadence that cannot be duplicated and cannot be accidentally lost because the transactions will simply fail if the code loses a resource, which makes it really safe to create smart contracts because when you're trying to represent scarce digital assets of value, you don't want things to be duplicated accidentally and you don't want things to be lost accidentally. And Cadence makes both of those use cases very, very hard, if not impossible to do, which is what we want. And in this case, we're creating a resource called a profile and saving it to our account. And then once we have that, then we can mutate it and change it and update it. So we need to create an init account function that will allow us to create our account. And this is what it looks like, right? Whereas fcl.query allows us to query the chain in a read-only way. And you've noticed we didn't have to assign a transaction or log in with Blockto in order to do it. Well, we logged in initially, but we didn't have to sign or approve the transaction or pay a transaction fee. Whereas mutate requires us, it will actually change something on the chain. It'll actually create a resource on our account and save it there. And it's going to live forever on chain, which is pretty exciting. So let's do that. I'm just going to copy again the index and show you what changed so that we can simplify the copy and pasting. So we had the send query, which we already looked through, and now we have the init account. Now the init account, again, see, we're using fcl.mutate instead of fcl.query. And we're still importing the profile resource, but in this case, right? If the user does not have profile, then we create a new resource by calling profile.new, and we're going to move it to the account. This is the move operator in Cadence, and it's the only way through which resources can be shifted in from one place to another. So it assures that where was moved from, the resource does not exist anymore, and where it's moved to, the resource has to be there before the transaction closes. Otherwise, it could get lost. And the transaction, if it does get lost, the transaction fails. So there's no way to lose a resource. So we're calling profile.new from the profile contract here, right? It just creates a base profile and returns it, again, using the move operator. So resources have to be explicitly created or explicitly destroyed in Cadence. And in this case, it's just being moved. So it's created via the new method, and it's being moved and saved to the account. And then we create a public capability that lets applications read the profile's info into the account. So when we want to read the profile info, we don't have to have access to that profile information. We can just use the capability that's public and get the information that the capability exposes. All right. And to mutate the chain, of course, we need to specify who pays for this transaction and who proposes and signs this transaction and how much gas fee we want to pay. Awesome. So shall we give it a whirl? So let's refresh our page and let's init account. Now, again, this is a mutate. So we're going to have a blockto flow that asks us whether we want to run this script. And what does the script do? It is going to check whether we have a profile address. If we don't have it, it's going to create a new profile resource and save it to our account and include a public capability so that we can then query it. So let's approve that. And in this case, we don't have any transaction feedback, but what's happening in the backend is actually, we can actually see what's happening in the backend by going to flow scan, typing in, go to testnet.flowscan, and typing in our testnet address. And you see we have book transaction. We open that. So we see it executed successfully and it's sealed. If you want to get information on the various states of the transaction, I create my little quick start where you can see these states a little bit more clearly. You go to the live demo here. So this is a very much spruced up version of what we are creating. So sorry for the spoiler, but we log in with Blockto, Flow app, and boom. Now, if we update the profile, you see we are initializing and we have to approve transaction. Then it's pending. So the transaction has been received by collector, but not yet finalized in the block. So the collector nodes have received the transaction, but it needs to be added to a block, and it's executing, then it's executed. And so it's sealing and it's sealed, meaning that the verification nodes have verified a transaction and the seal is included in the latest block. That means the transaction is final. It cannot be reversed. And here is where you can see the various states here. There we go. This is what I was looking for. This here, if you go to the docs.onflow.org/access API and you look for the various transaction states. So it's unknown, pending, finalized, executed, sealed, and expired. Feel free to pause the video and read, but they have corresponding values. And the reason I'm showing you this is because we're going to be adding something soon that will display this numerical value, but it's important that what it refers to. And if you want to have a spruced up UI version of what we're doing, again, feel free to check out the Next.js Quickstart that was created by yours truly. And then the link is at the top of the tutorial. Cool. So we queried the blockchain, we mutated the blockchain by initializing the account. Now we need to mutate it again by setting our name. In this case, we're going to call ourselves Flow Developer. Isn't that awesome? And the way that we do that is we still use mutate, just as we did before. And we are going to pass as an argument to the transaction our name that we want, right? And we're going to call set name from our profile resource by borrowing that capability and setting that name with our argument. Cool. So let's And we're also going to listen for changes here. So we're going to use the subscribe method. So here you see the transaction is using once sealed. Once sealed will return only once the transaction is sealed. So status number, quick test. Do you remember the number? 4. And yeah, whereas if you want to subscribe to the various states of the transaction, then you want to do subscribe instead of once sealed. And we'll see how to do that in just a second. Well, you can see it here, right? Rather than awaiting and doing once sealed, we are doing FCL.transaction. Same thing, but then subscribing and then setting a transaction status. So we have a new variable. And let's replace everything and show you what's changed. So here we have execute transaction. We also have a new transaction status state. And here we are setting it here using set transaction status. And yep, we now have a new function called execute transaction, which will mutate the blockchain again, not just to initialize the account, but to actually update the account and display and set our name to be Flow Developer. Isn't that something? So let's go back to our local host and let's execute. So now we have send query. We are Anon, right? Anon is the default name in the contract. So if we actually go to the contract and look for Anon, see here, the initialized name is Anon because we haven't changed it yet. And the default color is a very ugly brown, as we can see in the spruced up version, which also shows the color. But anyways, and here, see the favorite color. We are going to execute the transaction, and our transaction in our case is just going to set it to flow developer ! Okay. So we can do execute transaction. Again, we're mutating the chain. So we are going to have to sign this transaction, approve it, pay the transaction fees, which are subsidized by Blockto, and it's on testnet anyways. And here are the transaction statuses. So here it's 0. So it's pending. Again, here are the various transaction. Oh, sorry. Now it's 4. So it's sealed. Now let's go back. See, sealed is 4. So 4 is good. You don't want 5. 5 means it's expired. And 0 is unknown. So you want at least 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. It often skips 2. Sometimes it skips from 1 to 4. Depends, but you want 4. And losing my right here. And now let's wait for the magic trick. If we send the query again to query our profile name and display it, will it change? It changes. We are now Flow Developer ! And we can change this. We can change this to be Andrea. Let's change that. Let's execute the transaction again. And we can see the arguments are Andrea, and we are rerunning that same thing. We are going to execute the transaction. Now it's pending. Let's see if it switches to 2 and 3 before it goes to 4. Now it's unknown. Sometimes does that. Don't worry. Now it's 3, so it's executed, and now it's going to be sealed. Now if we send the query, we are Andrea. Yeah, awesome. Cool. So yeah, so again, we are subscribing to the transaction state. Everything else is pretty much exactly the same. And we're done. Damn, that was fast. So as I mentioned, well, that was fast. It's 36 minutes in, at least at the time of recording. Hopefully I can cut this down a little. And we have the ready-made, easier to follow, or the more, I wouldn't say easier to follow, it's more complete, but this quick start gives you a good idea of what we're doing and why. So I really recommend you follow this. And hopefully this quick start video and walkthrough video has helped you kind of understand what's happening, given that the UI is not very, is not very explicit in what it's doing, only the explanation is. And now that I've done this, you can see how someone else could have created, using the same contract, using more or less the same exact code, a more spruced up version. So you have the login, right? Let me refresh this page. We can log out. We can log in using the same exact code as we just did, using Blockto, using our same exact account. And rather than just set the name, we can also show everything else, like the name, the favorite color. We can change the favorite color, but this is all UI stuff. And add a little bio, dev advocate, flow, advocate. Let's keep advocate, update profile, and approve the transaction. And now we also have a transaction component, which I wanted to add to make it easier to see what was happening rather than just the numbers changing. So now it's pending and it has a link to the transaction flow here. It's executed and sealed. So now when I query the profile again, the favorite color is updated and the dev advocate is updated as well. Isn't that awesome? So with this, I recommend you dive deeper into the slightly more polished quick starts here in your favorite framework. If you don't see your favorite framework here, please contribute it. I also recommend you check out some of the resources at the bottom of the documentation. For example, the Cadence Playground tutorials, which are a great way to learn Cadence a little bit more in depth. Also highly recommend to check out Kitty Items, which is more of a fully fledged NFT marketplace, as well as check out some community educational content such as Jacob Tucker's brilliant YouTube series and YouTube account, which has a ton of videos on Cadence FCL and developing on Flow in general. Anyways, it's been a blast. Hopefully this video was useful in some way. All the best in your flow building journey and see you around. Feel free to jump by our Discord, discord.gg/flow, and say hi. My name is Andrea.fine there, and I'm looking forward to seeing you. Bye-bye.